She entered with elegance, wearing a flawless smile that lit up the room. But within minutes, that serene charm cracked. By the end of the segment, millions would be left wondering who really lost their cool. The show had invited her for what was meant to be a light-hearted morning conversation. Yet, what took place between Meghan Markle and Michael Strahan turned into something far more explosive than a simple PR misstep. It quickly became one of the most buzzed-about moments in morning television history. Inside the Good Morning America studio, the usual energy flowed. Makeup artists flitted from chair to chair, production assistants whispered into headsets, and the air was thick with the smell of fresh coffee and the quiet tension that always came before going live. Michael Strahan, ever composed and polished from years in front of the camera, sat calmly in the green room, going over the day's rundown. He'd interviewed presidents, Oscar winners, and star athletes, but today's guest brought a different kind of anticipation. Meghan Markle, once a working actress, then the Duchess of Sussex, and now a global figure, had arrived for a special live interview. On paper, the topic was her new wellness documentary and her charity efforts. But the producers were fully aware this conversation could shift at any moment. Meghan had been dominating headlines, Netflix projects, royal controversies, and constant speculation about her marriage to Prince Harry. Even so, Michael wasn't planning a trap. That wasn't his way. Meghan came early, poised and gracious, dressed in a sleek ivory pantsuit that blended regal elegance with a touch of Hollywood glam. She greeted everyone warmly, admired the studio flowers, and even cracked a light joke with the producer. Still, behind her polished smile and graceful posture, there was something else, something unreadable. At exactly 8:17 a.m., the red light above camera 3 switched on. They were live. Michael offered his signature smile. Good morning, America. Today we have a very special guest. Meghan Markle joins us to talk about her latest projects, her new documentary, and life after the royal spotlight. Thank you, Michael. It's always a pleasure, Meghan replied smoothly. Her tone was calm and perfectly controlled. The first few minutes played out without a hitch. They discussed her wellness work, motherhood, community service, safe, positive topics. Meghan responded with confidence and clarity, weaving in terms like authenticity, healing, and personal growth. Then Michael gently shifted gears. So Meghan, he began, you've played many roles, actress, activist, royal. When you look back at your acting days, do you think that experience helped prepare you for the intense public spotlight that followed? For a brief second, Meghan's face stayed neutral. Then, a slight narrowing of the eyes. I think it's a bit limiting to focus on my acting, she said. There's much more to who I am today, Michael. Michael nodded, keeping it respectful. Sure, but wouldn't you agree those early roles helped shape public perception of you? Meghan let out a short, restrained laugh. Perception is an interesting thing, she replied. People tend to believe what they're fed, especially by the media. Her tone had cooled slightly. In the control room, a producer whispered into their headset. Oh. Michael remained steady, unfazed by the shift. Fair point, he said. But interviews like this, aren't they an opportunity for the public to hear from you directly? Meghan's smile faltered ever so slightly. Assuming the questions are thoughtful, she said. The silence that followed stretched just long enough to be noticeable to the audience at home. But Michael, a veteran of live tension, didn't pause. He moved on. There's been plenty of speculation about your relationship with the press, he continued. Some say that contributed to your departure from the royal family. Looking back, would you say that's accurate? And there it was, the question that cracked her composure. Meghan shifted in her seat, crossed her legs with intention. That's an oversimplification, she said. I left because I wanted peace. I wanted my kids to grow up in a world where their mother wasn't constantly dissected on national TV. She glanced sideways. Ironically, here I am again. Michael raised an eyebrow. And yet you've remained in the spotlight, documentaries, podcasts, interviews like this one. Some would say you stepped away from one kind of fame only to embrace another. The tension in the room thickened. Meghan gave a cool smile. Are you suggesting that speaking on my own terms is the same as being hunted by tabloids? Not at all, Michael said evenly. I'm just noting that your exit wasn't exactly a withdrawal from public life. The camera zoomed in, picking up every nuance. Unlike the tabloids, Meghan snapped, I get to control the story. That's something you can't understand unless you've lived through it. Michael remained composed. As someone who's faced the pressures of journalism and professional sports, I'd say I understand the weight of public perception more than most. The moment hung heavy between them, two pros, locked in a high-stakes game of words and willpower. Michael kept his voice measured. Let me ask you this, he said. Do you think leaving the royal family had anything to do with your background, your childhood, your time in Hollywood? Did any of that conflict with royal expectations? Meghan didn't blink. If you're asking whether I was too American for the monarchy, she replied, then yes, and I wear that proudly. A few audience members let out awkward chuckles. Michael offered a polite smile, though his eyes stayed focused on her. And has that cultural difference affected your relationship with Prince Harry in any way? Meghan's tone shifted again, colder, more precise. My marriage is not for public display, Michael. I came here to speak about meaningful work, not to fuel the tabloid machine. No offense intended, Michael said. But people are curious. You and Harry have become symbols of change. Part of that story is how you've supported each other through it. Symbols? Meghan repeated with a smirk. Or targets? Her voice was sharp now, void of humor. The studio quieted. Crew members stood still, sensing what was unfolding. Michael stayed steady. I guess it depends on who you ask, he responded. Some people say you've challenged the public narrative. Others think you've blurred the line between personal privacy and public exposure. And some, Meghan said flatly, just like to hear themselves speak. Boom. A jolt went through the control room. One of the producers stood up, stunned. Did she really just say that? Michael didn't react. He leaned back, thoughtful. I'm just asking questions people care about. And I hope people care about the right things. Meghan snapped. She folded her arms. Like mental health, education, equality, not whether my marriage makes a good tabloid headline. Michael's smile tightened slightly. Then let's focus on that, if you're willing. The tension was unmistakable now, still civil, but with an edge that no one could ignore. The studio air had grown heavier. Michael sat tall in his chair, calm as ever, though something in his eyes had changed. It wasn't anger or irritation. It was focus, the kind that's more dangerous than either, especially on live television. Meghan's posture had shifted too. She no longer leaned in or smiled for the cameras. Now, she was leaning back, relaxed, even a little smug. Her fingers played with the edge of a cue card on the table like she was in control. Michael cleared his throat. Meghan, I appreciate your honesty about the media, he said. But let's switch gears for a moment. Viewers are really curious about your transition from acting to royal life. Do you think your time in Hollywood prepared you for Buckingham Palace? For a moment, Meghan blinked as though she hadn't expected that so soon. Then, her smile returned, but it was cooler now. You mean to ask if playing a paralegal on Suits helped me sit beside the Queen? She said. No, Michael. I wouldn't say that was helpful. Honestly, it's kind of a silly question. Michael held her gaze. Not at all, he said. Plenty of people make big career shifts. But I imagine there were some similarities, like dealing with public pressure, or having to balance who you are with what's expected of you. Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. I think what you're really asking, she said, is whether I ever deserved that role. Michael replied smoothly. I'm asking whether your past helped or hurt the transition, and whether you felt ready for what came next. Meghan chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Prepared? For a family that saw me as a prop in their historical narrative? She said. Let's just say no script could have prepared me for that. Behind the scenes, the producers began shifting in their seats. One director mouthed to another, "Let it play." They knew this was turning into viral gold. Michael turned to a new card. "Let's talk about your decision to step back from royal duties," he continued. "There's been talk that it wasn't just the press, but also tension within the palace." Meghan's face changed again. "Here we go," she muttered, just loud enough for the microphone to pick it up. Michael raised an eyebrow, but pressed forward. "There have been reports, unconfirmed of course, that some of the conflict came from your own behavior. That perhaps you weren't open to adjusting to royal tradition." There was a pause. Off camera, someone took a sharp breath. Meghan didn't flinch. "And I suppose that's coming from one of those mysterious palace insiders?" she asked, her voice calm but cutting. "The ones who never show their faces but always have plenty to say?" Michael said nothing. The silence became his move. Meghan lowered her voice. "Look, I know how easy it is to paint me as the problem," she said. "People love that story. Especially when it's about a woman. Even more so when she's a woman of color." She leaned forward slightly, fixing her gaze on Michael. "But let me ask you something. Would you be asking these same questions if I were a man who had married into the royal family?" Michael's face didn't change. "I ask every guest the questions that the audience wants answered," he replied. "That's my job." "And yet," Meghan said, her tone now laced with sarcasm, "you keep circling back to the same idea, that somehow I brought all of this on myself." Michael calmly flipped to the next card. "Is that not a possibility?" Meghan's smirk faded. Her voice dropped, icy now. "I think we both know what kind of interview this is," she said. "You're not here to understand me. You're here to chip away at me. Nicely, of course." With a smile. "But a chisel is still a chisel." Michael nodded once. "I respect your perspective," he said. "But let me ask just one more question." Meghan's arms folded tighter. "Go ahead. Your relationship with Prince Harry," he began carefully. "Some outlets have reported recent tension, separate trips, public disagreements. Do you want to respond to that?" Meghan laughed, loud and dry. "I'm not going to feed into tabloid fiction, Michael," she snapped. "If you're pulling your questions from the checkout aisle, maybe you should be the one playing a paralegal." That one stung. Behind the cameras, staff members flinched. Michael blinked once. Then he smiled. Not the kind he gives for TV. A different smile. The kind that said, "Now the mask has slipped." Michael stayed calm, his voice level. "I ask about your marriage because the audience, the same people who've supported you, want to know if everything's okay," he said. "If you don't want to answer, that's your choice. But brushing it off doesn't make the curiosity disappear." Meghan shifted in her chair, noticeably less at ease. "Funny," she said, her tone quieter now. "People pretend to be respectful while slipping in little jabs." She looked at Michael. "You've mastered that skill. And you've perfected the art of dodging responsibility," he replied coolly. "That's clear." Silence followed. The director held the cut signal in place but didn't use it. Behind the scenes, no one dared move. Michael flipped to a new card. "Let's talk about your production company," he said. "Are you planning to focus more on documentaries or scripted content?" But Meghan didn't respond. She just sat there, arms crossed, her gaze locked on him like a chess player realizing she was 5 moves from checkmate. Michael waited, letting the quiet stretch. "Meghan?" he prompted gently. She blinked once. Then, the mask slipped just a bit. "I think," she said slowly, "we should wrap this up." Michael nodded. "If that's your call." But the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone in the studio could feel it. This wasn't finished. Not even close. Meghan thought she could guide the conversation, but the mood in the room had turned. Her control had cracked. And now, with Michael refusing to back down, the tension hit its peak. The studio air was dense. Meghan crossed her legs and turned slightly away from Michael, a subtle move, but it spoke volumes. The gloves were officially off. Michael remained still, the cue cards resting in his hand. He didn't need them anymore. "Before we end," he said calmly, "there's one more topic the public has been discussing, your recent remarks about the monarchy. Specifically calling it, quote, a dusty institution built on outdated ideals." Meghan tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Is that really how you want to close this, Michael?" "You said it," he replied steady. "I'm just asking if you still believe it." "I said what had to be said," Meghan responded coolly. "Not everyone has the courage to call out what's broken. But some might argue," Michael leaned in slightly, "that you walked into a centuries-old system expecting it to change for you. And got upset when it didn't." Her jaw tightened. "I entered that system as a wife, a mother, and someone who wanted to make a difference," she said. "Not to start a revolution. But when I saw what it was doing, to my husband, to my own mental health, I chose peace." Michael didn't blink. "And the book deal?" he asked. "The docuseries? The Spotify contract? Were those about peace too?" That question had been floating around the edges of every interview, danced around but never directly asked. Until now. Meghan sat back. Her silence spoke volumes. Then finally she answered. "I'm not here to justify my choices," she said. Her tone was frayed. "I have a platform, and I use it. Isn't that what people always say? Use your voice?" "Absolutely," Michael said. "But when that voice brings in millions and global attention, it comes with responsibility. You can't opt out of that." Meghan snapped. "And who made you the expert on scrutiny?" Michael leaned back, folding his hands. "I'm not lecturing," he said. "I'm interviewing. Or at least I was. The producers didn't dare break for commercial. It was too electric, too real. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was a showdown." Meghan's jaw was clenched tight. "You've walked a thin line this whole time," she said. "Pretending to be respectful while bringing up every nasty rumor ever printed about me." "I didn't write those stories," Michael said calmly. "But I've read them, just like your audience has." "So now you're their spokesperson?" Meghan asked, voice rising. "No," he replied. "But I'm not yours either." That silence was sharp enough to cut glass. Meghan finally broke it with a deep breath. "You know what I think," she said. "You had a script the moment I arrived. You wanted your viral moment, your soundbite. You don't actually care about my work or my story. This was all for show." Michael raised his eyebrows slightly. "And yet you walked into it." Her eyes flashed. "Because I thought this would be different. I thought you would be different." He shrugged. "Maybe you should have done more research." That was the final crack. Meghan adjusted her blazer, pulling it tightly around her. "I think we're done here," she said, her words clipped. Michael didn't move. "Just one more thing," he said, holding up a final card. "You recently said in a speech, the truth has no expiration date. Do you still believe that?" Meghan didn't answer. She didn't look at him. "Play your clip," she said. "Get your moment." But he didn't play anything. He just stared. She stood without another word. Her heels clicked across the floor as she left the stage, each step echoing louder than the last. A slow, steady rhythm that marked the end of a very public unraveling. Michael stayed seated, exhaling only once the studio door clicked shut. The set stayed silent. The floor director's whisper cut through the air. "We're out in 3, 2, 1. The screen faded to commercial. The studio was silent. Not the usual kind, where voices lower just before going live, but an eerie, heavy quiet that followed something unforgettable. Even with the faint hum of the equipment, and the overhead lights buzzing, you could feel the weight of what had just happened. Michael Strahan, still calm, sat firmly in his seat, composed as ever. Across from him, Meghan Markle had leaned in, her poise unraveling moment by moment. What had started as a polished morning segment had now turned into a tense back-and-forth with the world watching. "Let's be honest," Meghan said with a tight voice, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "There's only so much of this interrogation one person can take." Michael didn't flinch. "You're free to answer or not answer any question, Meghan," he replied. "But this is live television. And you agreed to be here." She gave a dry laugh, one that dripped with disbelief. "Oh, please, don't act like this wasn't a setup from the beginning," she said. "You brought me here under the pretense of discussing my work, and then spent 20 minutes poking around in my marriage and digging up my past." Michael stayed composed, his hands calmly clasped. "I asked about your career, your choices, your public life," he responded. "You're one of the most talked about women in the world. Ignoring that would be unfair to the viewers." Meghan's glare sharpened. Her voice was edged now. "No, what's unfair is pretending you're Barbara Walters while using gossip headlines to fuel your questions." Gasps rippled through the control room. The crew behind the cameras froze. That line hadn't just stung, it had been crafted to land like a punch. Michael's jaw stiffened, but his voice stayed smooth and clear. "I don't pretend to be anyone," he said. "I'm Michael Strahan. I've earned this chair, just like you've earned yours." But Meghan was unraveling. Her tone turned cutting. "Let's not kid ourselves. If I were still just Meghan Markle, the actress from Suits, you wouldn't have invited me here. You'd be sitting with another NFL player talking touchdowns." Michael finally let a real smile slip through, not from amusement, but from clarity. "You might be right," he said. "But I would still treat them with respect." That struck a different chord. Meghan blinked, startled. Her mouth opened as if to reply, but the words didn't come. Instead, she stood up, slowly, deliberately, as if she were a character giving a final dramatic speech in a courtroom. "You know what?" she said, placing her microphone down on the table beside her. "I don't need to sit here and be part of this circus. This isn't journalism. It's morning fluff dressed in cheap controversy." Michael didn't move. "You're free to leave," he said plainly. "But walking out doesn't erase the questions." She adjusted the collar of her ivory blazer and squared her shoulders. "And staying doesn't make your questions any less shallow." With that, she turned and walked away. The studio doors didn't slam, but the silence they left behind made it feel like they had. The cameras kept rolling. Michael remained seated, his posture steady, his expression unchanged. He looked directly into the camera. "Well," he said after a beat, "that's live television for you. Sometimes you get inspiration. Sometimes you get confrontation. And sometimes someone walks out because they don't like the questions." He offered a smile, one with grit behind it, not charm. "We'll be right back." The screen faded to commercial. But the moment? That wouldn't fade anytime soon. By noon, it had already gone viral. So, what do you think? Was Michael out of line for asking those questions, or was Meghan simply too defensive for her own good? The internet was already divided. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy real, raw, and unpredictable celebrity interviews, especially the ones that take a shocking turn, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Eco Stories. Because sometimes, the most unforgettable moments are the ones no one planned.